So you take 3 potted plants, put them in good light, and then with plant A, don't water it. Plant B, give it just enough to keep from dying. Plant C, give it all the water it can handle. Now, you've run this experiment before. Most of you probably just focusing on A. What happens with plant A? It dies, right? No good. Plant B hangs in there for as long as it can. Plant C takes over your bedroom. So for the purposes of today's reflection, the water that we're giving to those plants is a metaphor for kindness. What you water with kindness thrives. What you deprive of kindness dies. Kindness is life-giving. Kindness is generative. It is liberating both to the originator of it and the subject of it. Kindness feels good. Kindness feels good. You've all heard the phrase, I'm sure, that justice is what love looks like in public. To riff off of that, I think that we can say that kindness is what generosity looks like in public. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe generosity is what kindness looks like in public. It's the transitive math of love. It goes both ways. And the point is that before generosity is an act, it is a mindset. It is a disposition. Generosity is a world view. It's how you look at the world. It is the expression of our foundational story. Who are you? Who are we? As Unitarian Universalists, we are a generous people. It is one of our foundational values which we've adopted within the last couple of years, and to which we promise our congregations and ourselves. And you surely know them by now, aided by the helpful acronym of JETPIG. So can we name them in JETPIG order? Wait, transformation, now pig. Pluralism. Yeah, okay, we did, honestly, the first service did better at that than you got there, though. Really weird, because the people that were in the choir, at least, they've already heard it before, so I don't know what's going on. Anyway. So the preamble to the values and covenant is also important to touch on as it frames those values and covenant. And it reads, quote, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love, it goes on to explain, is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love, end quote. It then goes on to say, inseparable from one another, these shared values are, and then it lists and defines and elaborates on our 6 fundamental values, which you mostly know, of which today we will focus on one, generosity. It's a wondrous thing that one of our promises as Unitarian Universalists is to be generous. Our Article 2 presents it like this. Generosity, it says, we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Therefore, we covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. I love that last line. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Generosity as connection. Connection, of course, is one of our missional aspirations. Now, there is an obvious material aspect to this. When we support one another, either directly or via institutions, we establish a connection. We are connected to the mountaintop, who we are generous towards, and they to us. Or maybe it's not so much that we establish a connection through generosity. Maybe it's that we reveal a connection that is already inherently there. And so generosity allows us to reveal that with intent. And in that way, generosity becomes about awareness. Generosity is about awareness. It's the visible sign that we are becoming aware of our interdependence, which puts the I in JetPig. Becoming aware of our interdependence inherently generates generosity. If interdependence is both an observational truth as well as a promise, and love is at the center, the generative engine of interdependence, then generosity is an organic and necessary avenue of being. Sometimes that generosity is about money or labor or food. Sometimes it's about space. Sometimes it's about agency or about listening, or it's about patience. Granting those things to one another is an act of generosity. We also understand that generosity is an act that acknowledges, observes, becomes aware of our mutuality. So don't confuse mutuality with transactionalism. In a transaction, you give because you expect to get something in return. Whereas a generous act happens because we recognize that we already live in mutuality. We inherently partake in and of one another. Generosity is the intentional practice of, as opposed to the subconscious reaction to, the reality of mutuality. Generosity makes visible the truth that I am of thee and you are of me. We are not identical, we are connected and unique. I am not you, but I am of you. And you are of me. And in the face of that truth, is there anything else to be but generous? We can see then that generosity is a spiritual experience. Think about the last time that you felt generous. How did that feel? That was a spiritual experience. To my way of thinking, a spiritual experience is any experience that expands or intensifies your sense of connection. And generosity does that. It does that because it is based in compassion and manifested in kindness. So a few weeks ago, I made the case that kindness was bigger than life itself. And that because of that, we can find courage when we need courage in kindness. And here again, we see how kindness, as the manifestation of generosity, taps into essential spiritual realities. Some of you may be familiar with John O'Donohue, the late poet and spiritual paragon. He wrote that, quote, "There is a kindness that dwells deep down in things. It presides everywhere, often in the places we least expect. The world can be harsh and negative, but if we remain generous and patient, kindness inevitably reveals itself. Something deep in the human soul seems to depend on the presence of kindness. Something instinctive in us expects it, and once we sense it, we are able to trust and open ourselves." End quote. So kindness is connection with the expansive depths of the world. And it may be that in this sense, generosity, compassion, and kindness are indistinguishable. I can't untangle them, and I don't know that I want to. But what is compassion but generosity of spirit? And what is kindness but the same? They seem to have similar definitions. So when our value of generosity is explained in our bylaws as a promise to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources, it's speaking to living with a generosity of spirit, to bringing that kind of presence with you into the world. For this kind of generosity is our faith. Compassion is our faith. Kindness is our faith. It is our faith in one another, in the holiness of every person and every being, a faith in our mutuality, in the interdependence of all existence, our faith in love. So in composing this reflection, one thing that I have found yet again is that it's really hard to talk about our values in isolation from one another. We can't talk about generosity without talking about love and interdependence, and we can't talk about interdependence and love without talking about justice and equity and pluralism and transformation. Our faith is a many-splendored thing, with love being at the center. It's bound to be. But look, the bit about compassion and generosity, or compassion being a generosity of the Spirit, or generosity being the spirit of compassion, that is the whole kit. That's what I want you to leave with today. That is the Alpha and Omega. Generosity is the spirit of compassion. But between the Alpha and Omega, between those spiritual realities, there's something a little bit more practical and a little bit more physical that we should probably pay some attention to. Some say that faith without works is dead. Others say, this is an old-timey theological debate, that faith alone is how we attain salvation. But that last one is not our theology. We are a works sort of people. Our fruit is from that theological branch. We proclaim that if your theology can't wear boots, you do not have a theology, you have a fantasy. And it's time to put our boots on. For the explanation of generosity that the UUA offers says presence and faith. And it also says resources. And so, maybe it's a coincidence that we get to explore our value of generosity on the last Sunday of Stewardship Month. Maybe it's not. Is it too on the nose? Have you seen the stewardship thermometer? It's not too on the nose. I could be more nose-focused. Last year, we discovered that this congregation is in the 7th percentile, as Charmaine was telling us earlier, of giving per member in churches throughout the Unitarian Universalist Association. The 7th percentile. And then we compared it also to churches not in the UUA, just churches of our size, and we found the same thing. We've been operating a budget deficit for years, surviving by dipping into our endowment in a way that's not sustainable or responsible over the long haul. And the solutions to this, well, some of them are easy. Actually, they're all kind of easy, conceptually. And they range from the draconian to the inspirational. And the choice between those two is yours. The draconian solution is to cut staff. Cut our new administrator's hours, go without a music director or a musician, forsake the professional audio-visual and liturgical dance squad, move to all volunteer religious education, become lay-led without ministerial perspective. Staff is far and away the biggest chunk of our budget pie, and I'm proud of you to say that we pay our staff fairly and in line with the UUA guidelines and local standards of living. But if you want, we can go in that direction. I think it's congregational suicide. And I think this congregation is way too important to let that happen. What we mean to each other and to Colorado Springs is too important. But the choice is yours. A much more appealing idea, everyone could add the number 5 to whatever it is they were going to pledge. Even if you've already pledged, you can go back and add a 5. So now it's 25 from 20, or 300 from 250, or 1,500, or 5,000 a month. Add 5, and then next year, add 5 again. Because taking care of staff is critical. I speak because I know I am, and thank you. But it's actually not the end of the ask, not by a long shot. Imagine if we had enough to start running programs for the Colorado Springs community. Imagine if we could become missional with our kindness and compassion. Imagine if we had enough to cover a member's rent or mortgage for 3 months while they got back on their feet, or maybe help them out with a car repair. My sister works for a Methodist church in Tucson, Arizona. And like almost all Methodist church, her church is dying. We're not. Her church is dying. One of their members just gave them a double-digit $1 million donation. Can you imagine? Imagine it. What would we do with $15 million? What would we do? Would we buy an apartment complex for unhoused people? Would we buy land to give back to the people that our ancestors took it from? Would we start a school? Buy a farm? What could we do if we wildly exceeded our budget for survival? That's the aspiration. That's the ask. And once we start moving in that direction, it will become easier and easier to move in that direction. The thought experiment all by itself, I find to be lubricating. But first, we have to do the hard part. First, we have to change the culture of this congregation. We have to change our culture. We have to transform, which of course is the T in JetPig. We get out of our scarcity mindset and move into a mindset of generosity as an act of integrity with a world that we have observed and affirmed to be interdependent, mutual in being, and generated through love. We move into a mindset of generosity as an expression of who we are. We seek that out as a spiritual experience. And through generosity, find liberation, find purpose, and find belonging. We practice that here. We practice that out there. We should add 5. After all, this place and the world that we want and the world that we hope to model here, it only exists, it only thrives when we water it with kindness, with our faith, with our presence, and with our resources. And with our voices. Let's rise and embody our spirit.